You are listening to the Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the Overwatch League news and information. The show with Tactical Visor on the statistics and analysis. Here are your hosts, Totally Drunk, Spider, and Slambo.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the latest Overwatch League news, information, and esports analysis. I am your host, Totally Drunk, and tonight in episode 94, we'll be discussing the latest news to hit the Overwatch League, share our thoughts on what had transpired in the Kit Kat rivalry weekend, and get you primed for the play-in tournament, as we look to determine who will join the top 6 in this year's Overwatch League season playoffs. Now, before we can get into the news and introduce you to my co-host, let me just quickly take a moment to thank everyone who is joining us tonight on Twitch on a different night than normal, but, you know, we got it. We're here. We're going to do a show. Obviously, we're going to prime you guys for the play-ins, all of that good stuff, but thanks everyone for joining us tonight on Twitch, and of course, we got to thank all of our repeat listeners out there. And as you can tell, joining me tonight is none other than Spider. Spider, I know it's been a little bit of a hectic week. We've had some stuff kind of happening, at your household. We've had the classic WoW launch. There's a lot of stuff happening in such a short amount of time, and playoffs are right around the corner. But how has the week been treating you?
It's been a week, man. It's been, like you said, it's been pretty rough here. My daughter's pretty sick. She's on the mend now, so hopefully she only gets better from here, but that's why we had to push the show back. But beyond that, I mean, there's a lot of other stuff going on, like you mentioned. But we're here to talk about Overwatch. I mean, we're here to it's a crazy week outside of Overwatch, but it's a crazy week in Overwatch because we're entering the playoffs. I mean, the play-ins for the playoffs, but still pretty much the playoffs at this point. So I'm excited to talk about it. I mean, the Kit Kat rivalry weekend was the thing that happened, roughly a week ago, and we should probably discuss some of it. But in the grand scheme of things, there wasn't too much that happened there that has a large effect on this week. Maybe some seeding here and there. The home team failed to deliver, which we will absolutely make fun of them all show for. But what about you? How has the past week been treating you in and outside of Overwatch?
It's been pretty good, actually. I am on staycation this week, which has basically been a series of hoping I don't have to sit in queues. But you know what? If there's one thing I've learned from WoW Classic so far, it's that sitting in queue gives me plenty of time to go get other stuff out of the way. So, I would use that time to, edit a show, or do show notes, get errands done, all of that good stuff. So, I'm at least keeping myself busy in between the lull moments. But it's been a pretty good week, and I'm really excited for, I don't want to say all of the play-in tournament, because I'll be honest, one of the matches in particular doesn't really excite me, and the thought of what would follow that, also not as exciting. But playoffs are so close. The season is almost over, and then, we're going to have a little bit of a lull until the gauntlet. I know we still have Australia Contenders Finals that will be coming up, same with Korea. So we have a couple of little distractions, but outside of that, we're going to have a little bit of a lull period before our next big event, and then eventually, of course, BlizzCon is coming up in a little over 2 months at this point. But there's a lot to be excited about, because, for starters, Overwatch League 2020 tickets did go on sale earlier today. Now, I will note it wasn't for all of the teams out there. So, a lot of the EU teams, a lot of the Chinese teams did not go on sale. And for some reason, Washington was also one of those teams.
That's so weird to me that they didn't go on sale, because they have both of their venues announced. I figured they would have been the first ones to go on sale, but it gives me more time to figure out what we're going to do. I mean, you and Ed talked about it, and we kind of talked about it a little last week, that you guys were talking about how lucky I am that we're here next to 5 homestands. But like one of the venues, two of the events, is in a really, really bad part of Washington D.C. So
Okay.
I am probably not going to go to that one. But the one at the Anthem, we'll probably go to that one once. Just my daughter wants to go see it, so I think that's like a good safe place. It's like right off the metro, so
Hmm.
that'll be cool. But yeah, I was really surprised that like the EU teams, I kind of expected the Chinese teams, maybe. But yeah, Washington threw me for a loop. Like you already told us where it's going to be. Just show us where the tickets are.
Yeah, and the funnier part about that is there are teams out there that have not announced, their venue that had tickets going on sale at this point. So it's kind of strange to see how that has happened because you have teams out there that there's like 5 or 6 that don't have any sort of venue announced at this point, and I want to say like at least 2 or 3 of them went on sale earlier today even without a venue picked out. So there's a lot of people kind of like shuffling around trying to figure out what the deal is. But it's kind of strange knowing that there are teams out there that don't have something picked out at this point. But we do have the full 2020 Overwatch League schedule announced completely. I did kind of like map everything out in regards to divisions, like who the host cities were in regards to the schedule on a spreadsheet to make things a little bit more organized. Because when you look at the 2020 schedule, you'll notice that all of the times that are posted on it are local, but it's local to whoever the host team is. So the times don't really display properly for your area, so I try to map all of that out. Doing math really early in the morning was not that fun, but in regards to 2020, now obviously we have the start of the home and away. We got 52 homestand events throughout the season, and we have 3 different teams that are hosting 5 homestand events this upcoming season, one of which is your home team, Washington Justice, and then we also have the Dallas Fuel and the Guangzhou Charge. But outside of that, we're gonna be in sort of an adjustment period. Obviously, all the games are shifting to Saturday and Sunday. We have some pretty notable arenas that we're visiting, and we've kind of seen different teams taking different approaches when it comes to picking out their venue. I know some are even at like hockey stadiums. Others have kind of like stuck to more of the like concert or like theater styled venues. So we're getting a pretty healthy mix, but it always kind of like grinds my gears seeing people complaining about the price points that we've seen set when it's very comparable to other like entertainment options out there that are available.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something esport fans aren't really used to. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, unless you're going to like Fortnite World Championships or stuff like that, they don't really expect like the premium price points that you typically get if you go to like a football game or not really a baseball game, because most baseball games you can get pretty cheap seats.
Right.
But football, hockey, some of the more premium arenas, which is what these teams are playing in. I mean, Philadelphia today has kind of hinted that they're going to do like a ball and game esports package because it's going to be at the Comcast Center. So, seeing these prices, I think there was always going to be a little bit of like a knee jerk reaction, but it's just something that people are going to have to accept because it's kind of par for the course for sports entertainment, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, to use a WWE phrase. But I was really interested to see like somebody had done all the math about how many miles teams are flying and stuff like that. And some teams travel way more than other teams. Like I think it's the what is it, the Atlantic South hardly travels at all because they don't have to go overseas at all because pretty much their whole division is inside the U.S. So they rarely go overseas except when it's like out of division games. Whereas like actually the Atlantic North goes overseas quite a bit. And the poor Dallas Fuel, man, the Dallas Fuel. First of all, they got like the short end of the stick for just who's in their division. Like
Right.
they're against like all the top tier teams, but then they also have to go to like Canada. They have to go to like Korea. Like it's crazy that they have to go to all these places. So seeing how teams travel next year and how they handle the travel is going to be almost, if not a bigger question than we asked this year. Like, how are they doing in practices? Like, how are they scrimming? Stuff like that. It's basically going to be which team is managed the best that can keep their heads focused and adjust to all this travel. And actually on Plat Chat, they were talking about it is based on, what games you have overseas. You may have an away team. Like you may have like a whole away squad that you're like, oh, cool. Just send team B to, overseas so we can keep our main team fresh and stuff and scrimming over here in LA or wherever they're situated. And, hopefully your B team can pick up the wins. I mean, Seoul showed us that you can have basically two functional squads and still win games.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not out of the realm to see teams, possibly explore that option. But travel next year is going to be a very big deal. And it's cool that they released it this early so that we could, do this kind of stuff. We could look at travel miles. We can look at the schedule. We can say, oh, these homestands are going to be good. These homestands are going to be like the Atlanta homestand where like all the crappy teams are playing, stuff like that. So it's cool that they did this. And there are some weird gaps in there. So we do have some ideas of when some breaks are going to take place and some things are going to happen since we don't have like the stage structure anymore. But all in all, like I'm really glad that they put this out early. The thing that took me like for the most surprise is people are like, well, I guess they're not introducing new teams next year. I'm like, yeah, they've said that since the beginning, and like even a couple of articles are like, well, they could sneak some in there. I'm like, no, they're not. It's like, just stop. Like you're gonna get your Chicago team in year 4.
Maybe. I'm not holding my breath at this point.
Maybe. Well, I'm cautiously optimistic that you'll get your Chicago team in year 4.
Yeah, we need another Midwest representative, preferably one that isn't in Canada. So outside of that, yes, we did get the 2020 schedule. You guys can go pick up your tickets if you haven't already. But we do have some news in regards to the Florida Mayhem, specifically their general manager position. And, Mayhem this season, they made a ton of different moves. Obviously, they basically went all Korean. They parted ways with a lot of the Misfits half of the roster. And their general manager, Matt Akavan, has left the org after being with the company for the past 3+ years. And by company, like that, like, obviously goes before the Overwatch League 2 with Misfits as well. So the Mayhem... they, at the time, like, they didn't reveal anything in regards to a replacement, but this is a team who, when all was said and done, they still finished at the bottom. I know them and Shanghai are still kind of, like, neck and neck in regards to, like, the overall record after Shanghai kind of, like, completely disintegrated in Stage 4. But, like... looking at the people that are on their 7 unit, like, do you feel like they're going to stay in-house and just promote someone like Bare Hands or to take over that role, since they are both currently assistant GMs for the team?
I'd imagine probably Bare Hands will get the call up to actual GM because he's been the one that's at least from what we've heard, he's been the one that's systematically dismantled the old Misfits, EU type roster and turned it into this, supposed Korean powerhouse. And they did much better in Stage 4, like they did better than the Shanghai Dragons in Stage 4. So apparently they're on the right track. So I think you give Bare Hands the chance to be a GM of this team and see what he can do next season with this new all Korean Florida team. It's still weird, but I am sad to see like this is he was kind of one of the holdouts from the Misfits days, and Misfits was such like a EU powerhouse team. That you could call them like the last remaining EU team because they technically lasted longer than Rogue. So it is sad to see that kind of bow out, but that's the direction we're heading. It's basically East versus West at this point. So you either got a mixed roster where you have like one Korean and then everybody else, or you have an all Korean roster. So it's interesting. Like I can't say I'm surprised to see this happen, just because of the way the team went. Like I was actually surprised this didn't happen earlier, but waiting till the end of the season, I think is the right call. So, my money's on bare hands though, for sure.
Yeah, so Mayhem did finish their season, picking up 6 wins, 22 losses. But, they ended the stage with a winning record, so it was a positive uptick for them, so it's something that they can build off of. And, it took a little bit of time in order for them to get all their pieces, but we at least got an idea of what the vision for the Mayhem is. So I definitely agree with you. Barehand's more than likely is going to get the nod primarily because he's kind of been the focal point. He's the one that you're seeing every time when it comes to, like, the backstage interviews talking about the Mayhem and their new sign-ins. So he just seems like a natural fit in that regard.
I just thought of this. How crazy of a world would it have been if we had a stage 4 playoffs?
Mm-hmm.
It would have included the Guangzhou Charge. Not super crazy, but kind of out there. The Washington Justice and the Florida Mayhem in the playoffs. The only two teams out of the supposed top teams that would have been in the playoffs would have been the Titans, squeaking in at the same map record as the Florida Mayhem, and the Shock, who obviously still looked very good. Mm-hmm. So I can't say anything negative about them. But think about that world where we would have had a stage 4 playoffs where the Washington Justice could have faced the Florida Mayhem in the finals for the playoffs. Like that, that almost makes me sad we didn't get one now.
Well, considering the likelihood that one of them probably would have faced the Shock, I don't know how confident I would be that would happen. But still, yeah, it would have been throwing everyone for a loop, for sure. If only. But Stage 4 playoffs were not a thing. And the Dragons were the final stage champions. And then they proceeded to go 1-6 in the next stage. Feels bad, man. But outside of that, there's been a little bit of commotion coming from one particular person in the Overwatch League after some post-game comments that were made towards one of the head coaches in the league. So, Dogman, he has never been one to shy away from voicing his opinion or trash talking. Heck, we've seen him doing it in the middle of a game, shouting at people in the crowd, or like shouting at Jonah, even though everyone knows who would win that. But basically, after the Atlanta-Dallas Fuel game, Dogman was in one of the post-game interviews, and he was talking about the World Cup selection in regards to Team USA. And he was talking about their head coach, who is Arrow again, also the head coach for the Dallas Fuel. And I'm not going to read, the entirety of what he said, but obviously Dogman wasn't too happy. A lot of the Atlanta crew, whether it was from the main roster or from their academy team, basically everyone that was from the Atlanta camp did not make it out of the first round of the trials, which, if I'm not mistaken, had 30 players invited for Team USA. And that was over, the course of 4 weeks. Where they were trialing under 2-2-2 rules, because at that point everyone knew that Roll-Lock was coming to the Overwatch League. And Dogman basically comes out and he talks about Arrow being incompetent due to his roster selection and also with the coaching of the Dallas Fuel this year. And this kind of sparked a lot of conversation back and forth between pro players. Obviously you had some of the Dallas Fuel players coming to the defense of their head coach. But it was one of those situations where you're not going to get a statement from Arrow. Because if he comes out and says something, that kind of comes across as a little bit of unprofessional in some ways. But the thing that's throwing me off is, everyone's going out there on, on the internet saying that, well, we never see things like this in other sports, which 100% is not the case. But I can't say that I'm surprised, because Dogman has always been one to throw these things out there. But I'm all for trash talking esports. I feel like we still at this point don't get it enough. But I feel like it's one thing to trash talk another player, but it's also another thing to trash talk staffing members also. So like I feel like there needs to be a fine line between the two. But
Yeah.
there's obviously been a lot of struggles with Dallas Fuel, and Arrow's success from Fusion University hasn't carried over. So we obviously had like the stage 4 turnaround for the Fuel in the first season, and then we basically gave Arrow an entire year, and we were still seeing a lot of pitfalls from the Dallas Fuel. So I don't want to outright say like I'm going to disagree with Dogman's comments, but Arrow hasn't quite lived up to the expectations, and really Texas as a whole have been kind of just a pit hole in the Overwatch League so far.
All right, so as the resident Dallas Fuel fan, what I'm about to say will probably surprise some people and not surprise others. I actually 100% agree with Dogman in both instances. I think the trash talk after the game, we'll look at the post-match interview where he's like, haha, GG, we beat you, should have picked us. That's fine. That's trash talk. That's absolutely, I agree. We need more of that, and every sport does that. Like anybody who says any sport that doesn't do that, you're not watching the sport. Then you're zoned out, and it's on in the background. When he went into the conference, like the post match conference, where he actually said like Arrow's incompetent, stuff like that. They again kind of touched on this on Plat Chat, but that's not trash talk. That's criticizing, and he absolutely needs it at this point because, like you said, Dallas looked really bad last year. Arrow came in at stage 4, and we kind of attributed their success to Arrow, which could be, but they also had a meta shift on their hand, and they were the first one to pick up that meta shift. They had Siegel, which he absolutely was a huge part in their success. Siegel and Mickey basically propelled the rest of that team forward to give them the confidence to actually play the game. So we can attribute some of it to Arrow for sure, but the meta shift definitely helped. And then Overwatch World Cup 18 comes around, and they basically got dumpstered. So, and that was 100% on Arrow's picks. Like you can go back and watch the games. Zach is a meme at this point, but there were multiple points during that game where Zach basically did nothing, and it's been shown multiple times by other pro players. So he had to take the fall for that one. Their coaching was a little more lax when they played UK. They've said like they didn't prepare as well for them. That's why they lost. And then this year Dallas started decently strong, but again, if you look at the circumstances, that was almost 100% due to strength of schedule. They played, or lack of strength of schedule. They played all the bottom of the barrel teams, and they struggled against some of those. And then they had a strong homestand, which helps basically because of the crowd. And they struggled at that, if you remember. Like they barely beat Houston, who at the time was considered one of the worst teams in the league. And after the homestand, they won one match.
Right.
Think about that. So I think Dogman criticizing Arrow, maybe not the best place to do it, like in a huge public forum. But I think at this point, it's something that most people, it's one of those things like everybody's thinking it, but that guy's saying it. And he probably shouldn't have said it right now. It's one of those things. So I think, the criticizing Arrow and his coaching, I think Dallas has a lot of like introspective that they have to do. They have to look and see what's working, what's not. And, like you said, Unko kind of jumped on to defend Arrow and stuff like that. And even Dogman was like, look, Arrow's like the nicest guy I've ever met, but his coaching is not good. And Unko jumped in to defend him. Whatever, you're going to defend your coach, especially if you really like the guy. And obviously, all the Dallas players do really like Arrow. It seems like everybody does, but it seems like maybe just the coaching isn't working for them. And that happens. Great coaches can not coach certain teams. It just has to do with coaching style, player style. So I'm not saying that Arrow is a bad coach. I'm just saying he's not the right coach for Dallas. With this current set of players. So I think, the criticizing, I don't agree with where he did it and how he did it, but I agree that it kind of needed to be done. So, and, a lot of people go back and they say, well, Dogman underperformed in tryouts and stuff like that. And, he straight out said after the fact, like after he put out that tweet, like, oh, I underperformed and stuff. He has said since then that he did that to take some heat off of Raucus. So he like people have confirmed that that's why he did it. Because Raucus, obviously we're going to talk about the roster here in a minute, but Raucus takes a lot of shit.
Yes.
And some of it is justified, some of it is not. So I think that was a good move by Dogman, but I can see why he's still a little bitter. But yeah, I think we need more of this, and I think players need a space that they can feel safe doing this kind of thing in. And going back to the initial like trash talk, I want to see more of that too.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want these players like just bottling up these feelings and stuff like this. Like if players feel like this, say it, because that creates a storyline. Like now we're like, oh well, every time Dogman plays Arrow, whoever Arrow's team is, Dogman's going to be gunning for his team or something. It creates fun storylines. So I'm all for this kind of stuff. And for the message, I talked to a couple of people about it, and they're like, oh, how pissed are you at Dogman? I was like, well, first of all, I like Dogman, so not a big problem. And second of all, it needed to be said. So sorry.
Yeah, it's one of those things too. Like Dogman would put himself in that position regardless of how Atlanta does. He does it if they're winning. He does it if they're losing. So to an extent, like how seriously can you really take someone? But it's always about create a narrative or creating a storyline, and Dogman plays like that villain card very well, because really the only one else out there that's kind of at the forefront in that regard in the Overwatch League is probably Bumper. Bumper's always trash talking in the post-game interviews. Jonak to an extent does as well, but he does it in a completely different manner. It seems so like nonchalant when he does it, but Bumper just goes for the throat.
I will say that like Bumper, even Fisher, are better at it, and I don't know if that's necessarily just Danny's timing is better because he's translating it, but Dogman doesn't know when to like stop talking. Like that's the problem. Like some of the stuff he said would have been really good and really impactful if he just shut his mouth for an extra minute. Like if he just stopped there. Where he was, I forget what his exact line was, but it was something like GG Arrow, you should have picked us or something like that. If he would have just stopped there, it would have made for such a great tagline. But then he like went into like this whole spiel of like, they didn't pick me, we didn't get my teammates and stuff like that. I'm like, no, like don't. It's like when you make a really funny joke and then you have to explain it. It ruins the joke, man. Like just throw the trash talk out and let everybody else talk about it. You don't explain it.
So, with that out of the way, let's talk about the selections for this year's World Cup team for Team USA that Arrow is the head coach of. So, it's worth noting, USA was the last of the top 10 ranked countries to release their finalized roster. They were holding out. So, how different is this year's Overwatch World Cup team for Team USA? Well, support line, we have Moth from the Shock, as well as Raucus from the Houston Outlaws. No change there. And, really, here's the thing about some of our positions on USA. Our options are pretty damn limited. Like, cause you look at the main supports, we really don't have a lot of options there. With the flex support, we got a couple of options, primarily, Raucus, Sleepy, and Dogman were like the primary three. But, Raucus has been there pretty much every year, so they gave the nod to him. But it's worth noting, Raucus is the only Houston Outlaws player to make the final 7. And, he's also, like, the only one from one of the Texas teams to make Team US as well. But moving on to the tank line, we have Space from the Valiant for our off-tank. Really another one that didn't have too much competition compared to some of the other slots. And then for main tank, they went with Super from the San Francisco Shock. So Spider, when we look at the options this year, in regards to the shortlisted roster for main tank, we had Super, Fact Fiction, and Muma. Like, we know that we are going to be entering the new patch 1.39. So we're going to have Sigma introduced, probably a lot of double barrier. And, I feel like at this point, a lot of people kind of have, like, a skewered perception, because we're always seeing Muma in this current meta that we're in Overwatch League. He's usually always on Orisa, and Super has been seeing some playtime, but he hasn't been at the forefront throughout the entirety because they've been opting to play Smurf. So, were you at all surprised by the fact that they went in this direction with the tank line, or would you have preferred them to kind of stick to what they had been trying in the past, despite, some of our past failures with the World Cup?
No, I think it's a good idea to go a different direction. I think, tank is such an integral part, especially in the upcoming barrier meta that we're probably going to have. It's almost, I don't want to say it's back to goats as a carry role, but tank is going to be very important going forward. A little less so than it is right now in like the Reaper May meta. So I think going with Super is a good idea. I was a bit surprised that he didn't go with Muma, because I feel like Muma is the better all around tank. But Super's Reinhardt is definitely much better than Muma's. So maybe they're just banking on Rein being a little more in there. It's hard to really say what they think is gonna be the meta at this point. I mean, we've heard like Rein Sigma, we've heard Orisa Sigma, we've heard Sigma Zarya, like we've heard multiple different things, and that could even change because we have the PTR patch where Zarya and Symmetra both got a significant nerf.
Mm-hmm.
So we're
The
gonna
beam
see,
damage, yeah.
right, which actually just makes barriers stronger. Go figure. But so maybe they feel like Super's a good enough Orisa, and he's obviously the better Reinhardt candidate, that they just felt like that was the way to go. And of course they're putting Space with him because Space was the only off tank, like you said. So that is the tank line, and I can't fault them for that, because when you look at the past season's performances, sure, a lot of it was under goats, but one team is considered the best, possibly the best team in the league, and one team is sitting at home right now trying to figure out what to do now that they can actually spend money.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you got to go with the team that's in the playoffs. So I think Super was the right choice out of those two. So I think you could have made a choice for Fact Fiction, but as a whole, I think he was just kind of more mediocre. He definitely made a lot of progress during the end of the season when he finally got in with the Valiant, got a lot of playtime and stuff like that. So I think Fact Fiction you could have made a choice for, but I think individually, I think Super's Reinhardt just elevated him enough. The only thing that worries me about this tank line, and when we go more into the World Cup, we'll probably talk about it, but they don't really have a good Hammond player. Like neither of these two, I guess is the best way to say it. Neither of these two tank players have shown any real Hammond gameplay. So I imagine that if Hammond does come into play at some point, that might be a pitfall, a hamster-sized boulder in their way. So we'll see. But I think Super's the right choice.
Yeah, and with that, it is worth noting that the Shock do have 3 representatives this year on Team USA. So looking at the DPS line, we have Sinatra from the San Francisco Shock, and he'll be paired with Corey from the Washington Justice and KSF from the LA Valiant. So this one kind of screams that they're either expecting double hit scan, or they're gonna transition KSF back to playing projectile, which we saw more in the inaugural season from him, but obviously he's been playing some other stuff this year. primarily hit scan for the Valiant. So really, like that one out of the three was probably the biggest surprise for a lot of people, and everyone's like kind of like confused because they just forget that he did play projectile before he had to switch to hit scan, because the Valiant have Agilities, who has always been, you know, known to be a better projectile player. But you know, if you're Team USA right now, the reason why I like the roster that they picked is they just didn't bring out the same roster. Like, we have seen KSF compared to the inaugural season. He's a completely different player. Like, I know I specifically was dogging on him a lot during the inaugural season, especially when he was on the Genji. But this year, he has been a completely different player. He was an integral part of the Valiant's kind of resurgence later on in the season, and, you know, say what you will about them not quite, you know, securing a win this past weekend during their homestand weekend, but the Valiant were so close to making the play-ins despite having an 0-7 stage at one point. So Valiant made up a lot of ground, and KSF was a big part of that as well. But I'm really curious to see how Corey is going to do this year, because when you look at the Justice, Corey has been a hard carry this year for the Justice, and we've always kind of seen World Cup as this breakout performance scenario, but I feel like Corey has already done that, so I'm expecting a very strong showing from him. And, you know, I'm curious to see how Sinatra's going to do after he's kind of had a little bit less opportunities following the meta shift.
I think this is a good all-around roster. I mean, a lot of people have made the case for Hydration, but if you remember last year, Hydration hardly played. He is known to be very flexible, but not. I don't think he's any more flexible than KSF. He may bring one, maybe two more heroes
Sigma.
to the Sigma is one of them. Yes, I was more referring to like the Doomfist, but so I think that could be said. You know, the only thing that worries me about these three is none of these three are known to play Sombra, but Sombra still has a very good chance of being relevant with the heroes that are coming into play, because the hack and the EMP, instant barrier is gone. And if you're running a barrier comp that has no barriers, you're kind of shit out of luck. But KSF really didn't surprise me. Like, a lot of people seemed very surprised that he got picked. But Hanzo is a projectile character. Like, people tend to forget that because of the fire speed. But his Hanzo in stage 4 was pretty nutty. Now, it wasn't like Corey levels, but KSF is one of those rare people that can play Hanzo and Widow to a very good degree. So if you put him and Corey out there, you have basically double sniper in any combination you want. And you can have it at any time. So if, say, Junkertown is the map, you can run Corey on Widow and KSF on Hanzo, take the first point, and then you can transition from, you know, that to, you know, Corey on Hanzo and then KSF on, you know, whatever you want at that point. So there's more flexibility in here. Actually, the odd one out to me is kind of like what you said. It's kind of Sinatra, because we don't really know how much Tracer's going to be played. I mean, she did get a buff, so she does have a possibility. You know, she can actually pretty much kill Sigma outright at this point. You know, get him down to 50 health with that pulse bomb, and it's going to be hard for him to react to a Tracer. So Tracer could come in play. You know, we could see Sinatra come in on the Zarya if Zarya is meta, because Sinatra is obviously the better Zarya to fill in on a tank role than Super is. So I think, you know, from that aspect, I think it's a pretty well balanced DPS line, but Sinatra sticks out as the bench boy to me almost, and that's weird to say considering he's been such a mainstay in the World Cup, you know, conversation, whether it's positive or negative, you know, whether you're talking about, you know, Zenyatta orbs or triple blinks or whatever. But it's weird for us to be talking about this instance where he could be on the bench behind two players who halfway through the season were considered not very good. So it's interesting. Like I'm curious to see how this does. I I will be the first to admit I don't have a whole lot of faith in this roster, and a lot of it stems from the support line because it is identical to last year. I would have liked to see something different. Um, at mostly out of Raucus. Like I would have liked to see someone else. Um, like I said, that Raucus takes a lot of crap for certain things, and some of it is deserved. But you have to look at other players, like even specifically Dogman. Like even if let's say he did underperform in tryouts, right? So what? Look at how he's played through the season. You clearly see that he is highly flexible, highly dangerous, and he brings a level of energy to the team that some other teams just don't know how to deal with. And I can tell you that the amount of flanks that Dogman goes on versus, Raucus, as much as we say Dogman is a feeder because he is, his flanks work out more than Raucus's do. Like most of the time, Raucus just gets caught halfway and dies. So I would have liked to see something different there, but we'll see how it turns out. I still have no faith in any roster that's been announced to beat Korea because Korea's roster is just insane. So, we can talk till we're blue in the face about like all these different rosters, but I still don't have a confidence that any of these teams can beat Korea right now.
Yeah, at some point, probably leading up to BlizzCon, I would like to kind of like revisit some of the teams, maybe do like our top 10 rankings for the World Cup. And we'll see how different that is compared to like what the SR rank was for the country, since that's kind of the only reason why US is ranked so high. Because it's not based off of how they've done, since they've kind of lost in the round of 8 all the time. Feels bad, man. But who
Every
knows?
time.
Who knows, man? Maybe this will be the year. We'll make it one round further. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But if I had to put money on it, I would imagine Sinatra will be the Sombra player on this team. Potentially Zarya. It's just a matter of, well, are we actually going to be seeing a ton of Tracer play? So if we see Dive, like, we'll see Sinatra and KSF. If we're seeing double hit scan, obviously it'd be Corey, KSF. If Zarya comes into the mix, Space will get benched, and Super and Sinatra will be the tank line. Because that worked pretty well for the Shock during 3-3. But all this is going to depend on what the bracket is going to look like, and at least if you're US, you're at least guaranteed to be at BlizzCon. You don't have to go through the prelims or anything like that, unlike the rank 6th through 10th, and then everyone below that having to vie for their spot on the main stage. But World Cup is not until November, as opposed to having, these group stages lead in past the Overwatch League season, so bit of a change of pace this year in regards to that. But we did just come out of the Kit Kat Rivalry Weekend, which was hosted by the LA Valiant. And, it's rough being a Valiant fan. Going in, they had a really rough schedule this past week in order to try to lock in their spot for the play-ins. They faced both other Cali teams, first the LA Gladiators, and then the San Francisco Shock. And it's worth noting that when it comes to the Shock are a team who do not give two shits about what predicament you're in. That is a team that is always, like, pedal to the ground and in your face, and they don't let up. And they did not give up a single inch, what felt like, against this past week. So, I feel for the Valiants. They were the only home team to lose both of their games, which kind of sucks. And because of that, you have the Chengdu Hunters securing the 12th seed for the play-in tournament. And Hunters, I know there's a lot of Scrimbuck talk about how they're looking like a pretty strong team in the current meta. We'll see if that shakes out. But They also face a really hot team in the play-in, so I'm excited about that. But what were your thoughts on how the Valiant did? Because I wouldn't say that the Valiant performed poorly. It's just they had a very tough strength of schedule to close out the season, and when all the chips were on the line, they just could not cut it.
I'll say it. They performed poorly. They did not meet expectations. Like they, however you want to spin it, they had a chance to beat the Gladiators, and the Gladiators, you know, to their credit, played decently well, but the Valiant just didn't play well enough to beat that. Um, it, they, I mean, you got to think about it. The Valiant only took one map the entire weekend. That this is their homestand. This is like this is their time. And sure, you can make the case that they were still playing in the Gladiator territory, or you can even say maybe the Shock territory because it's close enough. But still, like there were a lot of Valiant fans there, and they left early both nights. I was sad that they didn't make it because I said it last week that I wanted the redemption arc, like the story where we see them come back, but they couldn't do it. And like you said, the Shock just did not care. They were like the Shock had that mentality of and it's a mentality like visiting teams should have in home stands to help you get through it. Like it's the way teams are coached to get through the home field advantage, where basically you use that against them. You basically say, all right, let's destroy these people in front of all of their fans.
Yeah, quiet the crowd.
Yeah, exactly. So you could tell that's exactly what the Shock wanted to do. Like they went out and they didn't screw around. Like there was no NYXL versus Vancouver shenanery going on, where comps were just off the wall. Like it was like Shock, like, all right, cool, here's our best comp and we're gonna beat you into the ground with it, and then we're gonna go home early tonight because these matches are gonna be over quick. And then that's how the weekend ended. Like it kind of ended with like a whimper. Like it was very sad. Like I wish they would have did the Gladiators game second, because I gave them a little bit of crap that they only took one map, but the Gladiators game was fairly close. Like the 3-1 doesn't really do it justice, but there were multiple points where the Valiant could have easily taken the lead or put themselves in a position to do better, and they just couldn't like seal the deal. Like there were multiple times that you saw that they, for lack of a better word, just choked. Like they could not complete what they needed to do. So I pinned this 100% on the Valiant because I said it last week, and I'll double down on it now. The team that they had to beat was the Gladiators. Like they were not going to beat the Shock. Because like you said, the Shock are just that team that are not going to be like, haha, we want to see our friends get into the playoffs and stuff like that. Like go our brother team. No, the Shock are like, we're going to destroy you because we're going to win all the playoffs anyway. So it doesn't matter who we play. And like I said, the whole weekend, I spun it last week, but I knew going in, like this whole weekend was going to be pretty lackluster. But there was some decent fun to be had, but the Valiant matches were definitely not one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Shock Titans series was without question the highlight of this past weekend. The Titans Excelsior series was I don't even know how to describe it. There was a lot of like tomfoolery and shenanery involved in that one, because like the compositions that we were seeing just made absolutely no sense. There were a ton of substitutions. Like, I know at various parts, like, we saw Repellent Slime starting for the Titans this past weekend. Thankfully, the night that I had Twilight starting, actually subbed him in after the Titans were down 0-2, and then it went to 5 maps, so I at least got, 3 maps out of Twilight when I thought it was just going to be 0. So that was nice to see. But it was... The funny thing about the Titans NYXL series is, we always talk about how, like, Excelsior have kind of been not kind of. They've been playing down a lot. They've been kind of slow to adapt to the meta shifts. A lot of people have been crying, like, where's Flower? Flower comes in, looks pretty good in spots, and, he definitely kind of got a boost due to the Ana play from Jonak. There were a lot of, like, nano barrages and things like that, which allowed him to have plenty of opportunities to shine. And I feel like it's kind of given New York fans, like, this false sense of security going into the playoffs. Like, I don't want to base how this team is looking off of a series that had just so much weird things happening. It was kind of hard to take that game seriously just based off of what we were seeing. And I don't know how you felt about it, but, like,
Yeah.
I enjoyed it, but it was kind of the equivalent of watching an all-star game where no one wanted to play any sort of defense. People were going on flanks that they shouldn't be going on. We had random 1v1s happening on the side of the map. Like, it was just...
Yeah. The best way I can break it down to people is watch the Shock Titans game and then watch the NYXL Titans game. It's two very different Titans teams. Where you saw, like, NYXL, to their credit, I don't think were trying their hardest as well, but you can definitely tell, like, they were like, all right, we got to do everything we can to at least try to win this, because that would be a good boost going into the offseason, regardless of how you feel. And you can say, well, they just meme till they lost and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, they can still go into the offseason saying that they beat the Titans in the last match of the the season or whatever. So but the Titans that played the Shock were the Titans that we're gonna see in the playoffs, because you could tell, like, back to the Shock point, like, the Shock are always, like, pedal to the metal, like, all the way through, and the Titans at this point have built up such a rivalry with the Shock that they're not willing to like meme and screw around with the Shock. It's almost personal to them.
Yeah, you could really argue, like, that's really the only Titans rivalry.
Right.
With the Shock.
Whereas you could tell when they came into the New York, like, they don't see New York as a threat. It's definitely like the I don't like thinking of the Titans as the villain, but it's definitely like the anime villain, like, ha ha ha, you're not on my level, so
yeah,
I'm gonna fight at your level.
It's a playing with your food mentality.
Exactly. So NYXL fans, I don't want you to get your hopes up. Titan fans, I don't want you to be worried, because, like I said, just a day prior to that, we saw championship caliber Titans playing, whereas NYXL looked decent at best this week. Like, I would say this past weekend they looked the best they have this stage, but there's still a lot of problems with the NYXL. So we'll talk about the playoffs as a whole, but I am not super optimistic about the NYXL's future in season 2.
Yeah, so outside of that, the other big note in regards to seedings was that Atlanta, during the Kit Kat rivalry weekend, went 2-0. So they defeated the Dallas Fuel 3-1, and then they swept Boston Uprising 4-0. So Atlanta, they secured a spot in the top 6 for the playoffs, so they get to completely bypass the play-in tournament. And because of that, we have the London Spitfire getting dropped to the play-in tournament as the 7th seed. So, Atlanta, we figured, it's got a pretty soft schedule. Sure enough, they go 2-0. But it's crazy to think, they definitely rode that momentum. They were one of the best teams this stage, and really, another 4-0, that would have been the only other way to finish stronger, but, they did drop a map to the Fuel. But if you're Atlanta, they took basically the week to practice on the Sigma patch, as opposed to practicing for, like, the Fuel and Uprising. That gamble paid off. They're in the top 6, and now they're that much further ahead in regards to playoff prep. And, I'm really excited. Like, Atlanta is that dark horse team this year for the playoffs, and really the only other team that I would put in that position as well would probably be the Guangzhou Charge, who will be competing in the play-in tournament. But what a year it was for Atlanta. You know, there were a lot of questions about their off tank at certain times. And we even got to see some of the B squad coming out. So we got to see Gator coming up on stage. Funny Astro got some play time. And, you know, sure, it was like garbage time essentially because it was in Mat 4. But you at least like to get their players acquainted to the stage and getting a little bit of experience when they've really just been behind the scenes, participating in scrims or just doing the review sessions and things like that.
Yeah, since you just mentioned it, I want to touch on that first. The Funny Astro play time. Holy cow. That dude is not ready for the Overwatch League because he forgot he was on stage at the Overwatch League because there were multiple times he went like full on Reddit Lucio, which is fun to watch.
That's what he's known for.
Right, but you can tell like as a team play, he is not ready for team play yet because I think when it was on Junkertown, right? Obviously that was when he played. He got into a room with basically the whole enemy team, and he proceeded to just bounce around and like boop them, and he got walled and he got frozen, and then he like solo beated and like there's all kinds of crazy stuff that he was doing, and I was just like, where has this been all season? Like, this is awesome to watch. Like, obviously in the grand scheme of things, horrible from a team play perspective, but it was fun to watch. But yeah, I mean, Atlanta, what a freaking season, man. They opened, first of all, go all the way back to the days of Defran when they opened the season on Ilios and ran Torbjorn, and everybody was like, haha, what a meme, Defran's on Torbjorn, and then they won.
Yeah, then it works.
And then they were like, oh shit, this is gonna be fun. And then Defran retires. They bring in Baby Bay. They kind of have a lull, but they still remain relevant by beating the NYXL twice in a row. When NYXL at that point were considered one of the best, if not the best teams in the league.
That was when we had Elite 3. Right.
And Atlanta goes on to finish the season with a 7-0 stage. It's if you're an Atlanta fan, you have to be pumped for the amount of like momentum they have going into the playoffs, and the fact that they were able to secure their spot in the top 6 is amazing. Like, sure, they play against the Shock, okay, but they avoid the play-ins, and that's what you want to see happen. And I think it was the right call to practice on the Sigma patch, because playing against Boston, playing against Dallas in the current meta with their current momentum, how much prep did you really need? Honestly, I mean, you can probably go through both teams in like one session of like VOD review, be like, all right, here's what they're probably gonna do. Take out Zach first. Go forward. Okay, take out Fusions because he forgot how to play Orisa suddenly, and that's it. Or kill Persia. That's the other key to beating Boston. And there's lots of keys to beating Dallas. Just play the game and you'll probably beat them. But yeah, as someone who supports the Reign, I don't know if I'll go as far as to call myself a Reign fan, but they are technically listed as my second team on Reddit. So my top 3 teams are Dallas, Reign, and Spark. I'm pumped to see where they can go because I have high hopes for them in the playoffs. Like, we'll go through our brackets and stuff like that when we know who's actually in the top 8. But my initial brackets have the Reign doing very well. So I'm excited to see where they go, and the 7-0 stage is awesome that they got to join that. Now the only team to have 2 7-0 stages were the Titans and the Shock. So no team pulled it off 3 times, sadly. So it's I want to do like a whole retrospective of the season because there were a lot of fun moments like this with like the Reign, with the Shock and stuff like that. So when we go back and look at the whole season 2, that it's going to be very fun. But specifically about the raid, I am very hyped for them.
Absolutely. So, with that being said, obviously we're going to be talking about the play-in teams, but before we do that, let's go over the teams that are skipping the play-in tournament because they locked in top 6 for the season playoffs. So our top 6 include, in first, we have Vancouver Titans. NYXL are the second seed because they won their trash division. You have the San Francisco Shock in third, Hangzhou Spark in fourth. Which, they definitely turned their stage around because there was a lot of concern that they would be one of the teams that would be on the verge of getting knocked down into 7th, but that didn't happen. We have the LA Gladiators in 5th, and then the Reign secured that 6th seed for the season playoffs. Now, of course, as we mentioned, we do have the new patch for the play-in as well as the season playoffs. We have 12 maps altogether in the playoff pool. So, looking at the maps we have for Control, Lijiang Tower, Busan, Ilios. Assault is Hanamura, Horizon Lunar Colony, and Temple of Anubis. Hybrid being Kings Row, Eichenwald, and Numbani, with Escort being played on Watchpoint Gibraltar, Rialto, and Dorado. So, Spider, for starters, thank goodness there is no Paris in the map pool. I would not forgive them if they threw that in there.
No Paris, and if you're a London fan, no Oasis. So, these as a whole, I think this is a pretty good map pool. I have no complaints. It's a good diversity, and like you said, no Paris. I'm tired of watching Paris, and especially if we are going into a barrier meta, it's basically going to be who can get the most progress on point A. That's it. It makes for some quick matches, but yeah, it's a solid map pool, and I hope that they change it up for the playoffs or for the grand finals. Maybe switch a few more around, but I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to stick with these maps all the way through, as far as I know.
Yeah, it's going to be throughout.
So, yep. So no complaints from me.
All right, so looking at the play-in tournament, our seeds are as followed. In 7th, you have the London Spitfire. 8th, Seoul Dynasty. 9th, the Guangzhou Charge. 10th, Philadelphia Fusion. 11th, Shanghai Dragons. And then, barely hanging on to that 12th seed, you have the Chengdu Hunters. All right, so our matches are as followed for the play-ins. We have the Guangzhou Charge going up against the Chengdu Hunters. On the other one, we have Philadelphia Fusion versus the Shanghai Dragons. So as the higher seeds, you have London and Seoul, both awaiting the winners of the 2 prior matches. London will face the lower remaining seed out of the lot, and then the Dynasty will end up facing the higher seed at that point, with the 2 winners from those advancing to the top 8 for the season playoffs. Now, with that being said, there is a bracket tool that we've been using, which I will post in the Twitch chat, which features not just the play-in tournament, but also the season playoffs, both the upper bracket and the losers bracket, and you can fill it out, screenshot it, save it, and post it in our Discord. Let us know who you are voting for, but it will update as you make your selections. But I have to say, the Charge Hunters game, if you want to read a lot into Scrimbucks, this one could be a lot closer than people are expecting. I'm not one to fully cash in on Scrimbucks. I know a lot of people like to buy into them, but it doesn't always translate. And for me, right now, obviously you have 2 teams that both are coming out of positive stage 4s. A little bit more in favor of the Charge, as they did go 6-1. Hunters only went 4-3. But you have the Charge who basically ran shot through New York Excelsior, handed them their first 4 loss, and then they beat other, playoff caliber teams, like Philadelphia, they beat the Spark, they beat the Dynasty, and, there's a good chance that the Charge will end up facing the Dynasty again, should they win this match. Hunters You know, they had to hope that Valiant would end up losing both of their matches against the other Cali teams. Sure enough, that happened. But the Hunters, I feel like, are in a similar position to, like, say, Shanghai. You know, this is one of the first teams that went the DPS route, and we haven't quite seen them reach like an equal level compared to some of the other elite teams. But I don't want to discredit the Hunters because the upset potential for that team is always there, and they are a harder team to prepare for. But in the current meta, I have complete faith and stock value in Nero and Happy. If we see double hit scan, it's really hard to argue against the Charge right now. For me, the Charge are the dark horse team. It's just a matter of would I put them over Rain in that category? Because in the grander scheme of things, I'm primarily looking at Titans, Shock, Charge, and the Rain as like the favorites to take it all this year. I would love to see an upset happen, like in the finals. And I'm going to back the Charge in this one. I think Charge will take it. I'm not going to buy into the Scrimbucks. I have the Charge taking this series over the Hunters 4-1.
Ditto. I mean, you made a lot of the same points I was going to make. So I will have to just agree with you. But really, like, the upset for the Hunters, like the potential upset for the Hunters, which is weird to say that at this point, is always there. Like the Hunters have always known to have that random upset potential. Not so much with Guangzhou. Like Guangzhou's like the one anomaly because I think they're 1-1 together.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm with you. Like with Nero, and Happy, Guangzhou's DPS lineup is very, very strong. Chengdu's is good, but I don't quite have the faith in them. And someone who's been growing on me over the past stage has been Rio. Like Rio's tank play is surprisingly very, very good. It wasn't so much during the goats meta, but it is like low key maybe one of the best tank performances we've had because there were certain things he could get away with. And this is on the supports as well, but he could get away with cooldown usage and stuff that other tanks just weren't able to do. So I give the edge to Guangzhou. Like I think this one might go the distance. And this is one of the few games in the play-ins that I could make a case for either team. So I think this will probably be one of the standout matches, but I'm going to give it to the Guangzhou.
So next up, we have the Philadelphia Fusion going up against the Shanghai Dragon. So I'm going to let you take this one, because I know for me, this one probably one of the, like, less impactful games I could think of in regards to a playoff scenario.
So in this game, no one wins, but one team loses less, and that's the team that moves on to lose the next round. I don't have a lot of faith in either of these teams. Word on the grapevine is still not strong for either one of these teams. If you follow either one of these teams on social media, specifically Philly in this instance, their players are not happy about the new meta. Like Poco is angry about where the meta is going. So you can tell like he just does not enjoy it. And that doesn't lead to a whole lot of confidence when your main off tank player is cursing out the game developers. So I don't have a lot of faith in the Fusion. The only problem I have with this match is I have less faith in the Dragons. The Dragons went 1-6 in stage 4, which we're going into a new meta, so we don't know how indicative that's going to be of the play-ins, but it's the best thing I can make analysis off of. And Philly at least won a couple of games. They didn't do much better, but I will give the edge to Philly, and then they will go on to lose to London. So I don't know how you ultimately feel about it. I know you're not invested in this game at all, because I feel like you feel the same way I do, that
Right.
no matter who wins this, as long as the Charge win their game, that team is going to go on to lose to London.
Yes, I would favor London regardless of the outcome of this match. And it's worth noting, like, yes, Dragons finish 1-6. They're basically limping their way into the play-in tournament, and they really, when you look at the field, since they only won one game that stage, they only had more map wins over the teams that went 0-7 this past stage. That would be Boston and Dallas. And it's worth noting, like we've talked about the Dragons and how they've kind of had like their wings clipped in the 2-2-2. And even if we see some sort of meta shift, it's very hard to feel confident in that DPS line. I know Philly kind of has this attitude where it feels like they don't want to be there, and they've kind of like lost their luster in regard to like the Philly persona, or like the Map 5 mantra and the clutch factor. So they've kind of like lost what defined them as a team. There are still times when the DPS line shows up, and then there's other times when they go quiet, and it's just really hard to get any sort of like base measurement with the fusion. But that being said, like, there's so many question marks about the Dragons right now. We still see substitutions when it comes to their flex support. I feel like if you're the Dragons, you're going to need Gamzu to really be the one to keep everyone reined in. The DPS are going to have to show up for the Dragons, but this is going to be really a match between two teams that just have not had a sense of consistency here as of late. But I do think Philly will win it. I feel like they'll probably end up going probably 6 maps in this series. So I'm going to give it to Philly 4-2. So in this case, going into that next round, that would give us some matches of London Spitfire versus the Philadelphia Fusion. And then we would have the Seoul Dynasty versus the Guangzhou Charge. Now, I know the Overwatch League did an article earlier where they had their stats guy making predictions for the play-in, and then he also had Reinforced making his predictions, and this one was one that they disagreed on, was London versus Philly. And I'm not going to say, like, I'm a huge fan of this, like, the two teams that are playing, knowing that they're both kind of in the same boat, but it's really curious to see that we're in a spot right now where both of last year's finalists in the inaugural season are duking it out just to make it into the playoffs. Like, who would have thought that after the inaugural season? Like, you just don't really see that. Sure, we have 8 more teams this year, but it's just a crazy storyline to think about. And I'm not gonna go like too heavy into the analysis here, since it's not a definite outcome in regards to like who wins the prior match. But I know you kind of like voice concerns in Discord over Philly competing in Philly. And that might sway people to lean towards London, but I'm going with London primarily because you look at the map pool and Oasis isn't there. And I was like, thank goodness. We'll be able to take control, which will give us control of the series. And I have the
I wouldn't get ahead of yourself. They haven't done too well on control in other maps. They're just historically bad at Oasis. But they have a better chance of taking control.
I have them winning 4-2.
Yeah, I am with you. Like, I especially if you do, like, you don't want to cash in all those scrim bucks, but you got to at least believe in some of the scrim bucks. Like a down payment on with scrim bucks. London has been doing very well, so I see them winning. I mean, unless like Philly hires like a necromancer to bring back themselves from last season, I don't see them having the capability to play against London, because London, as shaky as they've looked, have still looked moderately decent. Like they still look as a passable team. Like Philly, like I don't know, like they just I don't even know where to begin on Philly. Like it's a disappointment, because you want to see the teams that did well last year continue to do well, because that builds rivalries, that builds storylines, that builds everything we want in a sports package. So I am sad that this is going to be the repeat of the grand finals so early, and I am sad that both teams are kind of limping into this match, uh, theoretically limping into this match. So I give the edge to London as well, and on top of that, like you mentioned, I don't want Philly to be there when I go to Philly, because Philadelphia fans at sports venues are the worst. I I'm sorry. Like I've gone to multiple games with Philly fans, and there are multiple Philly fans in my family. And if any of you watch that, or watch this, you know I'm right. Come on, it's not an opinion. It's a fact. Like we don't throw stuff at our team. Like that's the thing. Like Philly throws stuff at their own team. Like how bad of a fan are you that you're like barraging your own team with stuff? So yeah, I don't want Philly for that fact, but I don't think they can beat London in Overwatch beyond that fact. So yeah, there's like a whole analysis we could do of like EQO and Carpe versus Bird Ring, but it's theoretical. Like we don't even know if it'll get to that point. It could be London versus Shanghai. So, but either way, I have London moving forward to the actual playoffs.
Yeah, and something we didn't mention is we do get Carpe versus Adia before that match, so that should be exciting, or at least something to look forward to, at least with the Fusion versus Dragons. So looking at the other match in our scenario, that we would have the Seoul Dynasty going up against the Guangzhou Charge. So let me quickly set the table, and then I'll have you take the lead on this one. So looking at the overall series between these two teams, they do both have one win. These two teams face each other in Stage 4 Week 3, which went to 5 maps, and it was the Guangzhou Charge who took that win 3-2. So when you look at the playoff pool, you have the Charge who have a better record overall, at least in regards to the Assault maps. They're both even on Control, but Seoul has the edge when it comes to Hybrid and Escort, so maybe that will come into play, maybe not. But we have seen Seoul still trying to figure out if they're going to solely rely on Fleta. I don't think we've quite seen the Fleta deadlift performance here as of late. But the Dynasty tank line has really been something that's pushed them forward. And, maybe might make them look like a better team than they actually are, but we're still waiting for the Dynasty to live up to their namesake, and in order for them to do that, they need to make it into the actual playoffs. Because if not, that is just a meme,
Blizzard has given you so many extra playoff spots at this point. Like, just make it in there, all right? Come on. That being said, I'm going to lean heavily on the Charge to take this. So I think Seoul has a possibility to do this. They have looked increasingly better as the weeks went on. After the loss of Fisher, they turned things around and didn't miss a beat. Like they did really well. They had some struggles with Fitz versus Fleta, and some DPS issues, and they also had some flex support issues, during Stage 4 that they seem to have resolved at this point. Right. And I am glad that you brought up the tank line, because what won Guangzhou the last match that they had to reverse sweep against Seoul was Guangzhou's tank line. Like Rio and Hotba basically suffered through everything that Seoul threw at them to keep Nero and Happy in the fight. So it's going to come down to the tank line. Like if Marvel can keep it up and keep up the pressure, I think Seoul could take this one. Like it's very possible. And we don't know if either team has been practicing Sigma. Like we don't know how the meta will affect Guangzhou versus Seoul. Like Seoul seems very dynamic at this point. Like that is the one thing I give Seoul going into this match. Like if we looked at stage 4, I would kind of lean more heavily into Guangzhou. But with this new meta, Seoul and their pieces available to them just seem much more suited to quicker meta shifts. Like I said, they basically were running 2 teams at one point. Now obviously they can't do that anymore. But they with their pieces, they are better sorted. Whereas Guangzhou really, they have Fraggy, they have Bishu, they have Hotba, who is notoriously flexible. I mean, he's always trying to play Tracer. But Guangzhou is going to have to lean real heavy on Happy and Nero. So it's going to come down to how well they adjust. And then, if the tanks can keep up with that. So I'm still leaning more towards Guangzhou just due to historically and what we've seen recently. But this is a closer one to call than the other possible outcome. This is going to be a fun one. Like the first match that has Guangzhou in it will be the one to watch that day, and then the match with Guangzhou the next day will be the one to watch. So I have Guangzhou and London going through, but there's not a world where I don't see that Seoul could make it through. And the Hunters have a possibility. The only 2 teams that I count out are Philly and the Dragons. Like those are the only 2 teams that I don't see them possibly making a run.
Yeah, for me, I am expecting this one to go the distance. My biggest concern from Seoul's perspective is they have struggled when it comes to DPS smears because they've had a hard time situating like who they actually want to play. And we just haven't quite seen Fleta play up to the level that, the fans expect from him. Like, there's a reason why it's called a Fleta deadlift, and for one, we quite haven't seen that happen so far this season. So if it happens now, then sure. Like, the Dynasty will be able to take it. But I do agree, like, this match is going to be won on the front line, and these 2 teams are very close. The Charge being able to, like, bring it back from, the brink of defeat speaks a lot about that team. And while the Dynasty have been better acclimated to making meta adjustments, if there's not really, like, any big meta shift, you have to favor the Charge in this situation, because they've definitely looked like the stronger team in the current meta. Now, that being said, maybe all of that can just be thrown out the window. Maybe we'll get Double Barrier. Maybe Symmetra will be meta. Because, the beam nerf isn't going to be in for the play-in tournament or the season playoffs at that point, so teams can rely on it. And at that point, I honestly don't know whose wheelhouse that would be in at that point, but I give the benefit to the Charge. They've looked like the stronger team, and Nero to me is probably going to be the player to keep an eye on the most, just because he's really been the standout. But Rio versus Marvel, to me, is going to be one of the more exciting tank matches that we are going to see. So I want to see how that shakes up. And, Michelle versus Hoppa, too. The Hoppa, we kind of... I don't want to say we dogged on him a little. Like, we thought, like, his value would be a little bit lower since he's not able to show off his flexibility. But even though he's solely been on off-tank at this point, he's still been playing at a very high level and probably to a higher expectation than we had kind of set for him at that point, too. So, I'm giving it to the Charge. I'm expecting it to go 7 maps. And, yeah, we'll have London and Charge moving forward to join the top 8. And then, of course, we'll share our bracket next week for the entirety of the playoffs, complete with the losers bracket as well. But the Charge matches should both be very exciting this weekend, and I cannot wait to see whether or not they ride that wave of momentum that they have going for them.
It's going to be a fun weekend. I mean, playoffs always bring a certain level of hype and unexpectedness to Overwatch. Teams like Philly last year, even London, tend to show a very different look during playoffs. So I'm like super pumped for the playoffs because this is what it's been building towards all season and all those cliches and stuff like that. So I'm ready to get started. And instead of doing the show on Monday when we normally do, we're doing it on Thursday, which means that I can say they start tomorrow, so I don't even have to wait. Normally, when we talk about all this stuff, I'm like, cool. And then Tuesday, I wake up and I'm like, oh man, I got like 3 more days until Overwatch starts. I was so pumped for it last night. So, tomorrow I get to wake up, go to work, and then come home because, like I said, my daughter's sick. So normally we go out on Friday nights, but we can't even do that. So hyped for some Overwatch, man. This is gonna be fun. And then it's each week it's gonna get progressively more fun, and then there's gonna be a big break, and then there's the grand finals. So it's gonna be a fun month, man. Out with August into the playoff September. I have to find some fun way to say that they always say. So I don't know, but
Well, that wasn't it.
that was not it, dude. I am tired. It's been a long week, so I am ready to just completely veg out, play some World of Warcraft Classic for like half an hour till I fall asleep. Like that's the worst part about the queues. This is the end of the show. I'm gonna go off topic. I try not to pull an Ed and go off topic like in the middle of the show, but like that's the worst part about these queues is like I come home, I log in, I get in the queue, and then I get in, and then by the time I'm in, I'm like, cool. I do like one quest, and I'm like, all right, good night.
Oh, it's midnight. Time to go to bed.
Midnight. Look at you. You're so optimistic. Do you remember what our queues are? Like literally the first night I came home, I didn't get in. Like I went to bed at like 1. I was like, nah. And then the next night, last night, I was like, cool. I got in at like what 12:30, 1 o'clock, and then I played late. Tonight, what is it? It's almost midnight. So tonight I will get in before midnight. So
Yeah, I know. I know when I got disconnected earlier on White Main, I was about like 1:45 my time, and it was 88 minutes for me to get back in on our server. But with that being said, guys, we are going to close out the show for tonight. So if you guys want to help us out, the best thing to do is to head over to iTunes, go give us a review. We're always looking for ways to improve the show. If you'd like to find additional Overwatch-related content, we do have our podcast directory, which focuses on Overwatch, whether it's Overwatch, Overwatch League, Path to Pro, Fantasy Overwatch League podcast on our website, and then every Sunday and sometimes on Monday, we do the weekly recall. It has a listing of all of the prior week's episodes. So to find out more info, be sure to follow Overwatch Recall on Twitter at OW Recall. Now, if you would like to support our podcast network, you can do so a number of different ways. We do stream pretty regularly over on Twitch. So Twitch Prime subs are great. I know next month, so September, Twitch is doing September again, so I think it's like subs are like half off next month. So even more reason to go show some love to your favorite Twitch affiliates and partners. And of course, we do have our Patreon, where you have tiers starting at just $1 a month. So for more info, be sure to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/OWLnetwork. So you too can join the likes of our Master and Above patrons, Blazing Bob, Brendan, Joe Zabala, Owl, and Kesha in helping our network grow. But Spider, with all of that out of the way, why don't you go ahead and let our listeners know how they can reach us over on the social media?
Sure. If you want to send an email to us, you can do so at contact@owlnshow.com. You can check out our website where we post all the shows, various articles. We'll have some good stuff coming up for the playoffs. www.owlnshow.com. You can find us on Twitter at OWLNShow. Check out our YouTube, youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. We post all the shows. We put our Sigma video up. We have a Sigma deep dive video that should hopefully go live when the next competitive season goes live. I got a little sidetracked this week with all the stuff going on, but I still think I'm on track to have it all done. So definitely check that out and hit subscribe so you know when all those videos go live. You can talk to us directly on Discord, discord.me/OWLN show. We talk through all the games and various stuff throughout the week. And you can just come chat with us. So come do that. Like Totem said, we are on Twitch. So if you're listening to audio and like to listen to the live and see our very friendly looking faces, you can do so at twitch.tv/OWLN show. Again, we are a Twitch affiliate, so you can support us any way you choose to. And if you can't do that, definitely hit the follow button so you get notified of all our various shows. Monday nights, typically, is this show, which is 7 p.m. Pacific time, and that's Overwatch League Network. Tuesdays is the Fantasy Overwatch League show. Wow, that was a Freudian slip because there was no show this week, which is Owl by the Numbers, and that is Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And then Wednesdays is the Variety Overwatch show where you get to hear the aforementioned Edinar go off topic, and then Totem rein him back in so they can talk about all the various different things going on in the Overwatch universe, which is Heroes Never Die, and that is 5 p.m. Pacific time. We also do various host streams. Normally, I take this spot. Totem was gracious enough to move the show this weekend to tonight, so we could still talk about it. But hit the follow button so you know when we go live. And finally, one more time, our Patreon, patreon.com/OWL Network. You can find me on Twitter at SpiderGD. I'm posting various memes and random stuff. And if you'd like to hear all my thoughts on Philly fans, you can do so there. Totem, where can they find you?
Well, I'm also on Twitter at TotallyDrunkCTR. But with that being said, guys, that is going to do it for us here tonight on Overwatch League Network. You've been listening to episode number 94. Definitely be sure to go listen to HND, or Heroes Never Die, as last night was actually our 175th episode. Man, Ed and I are getting up there at this point, even post 100. So go check that out. Go listen to our plan for BlizzCon when the US team comes out. Everyone will enjoy that, and I'm sure they'll give us crap about it, but it is what it is. But we look forward to seeing you guys back on Monday for our next episode, which of course will be episode 95. Take care and have a good night.